They're digging for water, having to scoop holes in the sand until waist deep to try to get to the water table. And there are thousands doing this on what was once a river, and not a small one at that. It's the starkest image of how severely climate change is affecting Madagascar. And from our drone pictures, the snaking sand scar goes on and on and on. They dig because there is no water. This is all they have for drinking, washing, cooking, after the worst extended drought in 40 years. And this is a country which basically gets around on this, carts. Not many of them, in comparison to the population, have access to cars. They don't even have access to electricity. Only about 15% of the country have access to electricity. So they're one of the lowest emitters of carbon emissions in the world. And yet they are the country which is really feeling the most impact, with the UN declaring that parts of the country are on the brink of tipping into famine. Climate change is killing, and Malalaza is one of Madagascar's younger victims. She's barely got the strength to turn her head. She's the weight of a typical newborn. She's actually a year and 2 months old, with few reserves to fight disease. She's now got tuberculosis, but is too weak to cry and protest very much. She's living and slowly dying in the country likely to go down in history as the first to suffer from a climate change famine. The health workers have few weapons to fight this environmental war, and without a shot being fired, they're seeing suffering on a huge scale, and they are losing. With the bulk of the country so poor, they're struggling to get enough to eat. The weekly clinic in Abavombi is crowded with mothers and hungry children with acute malnutrition. Here, a swollen stomach is the sign of suffering and hunger. Nearly 90% of the country live below the poverty line, earning less than $2 a day. They're one of the poorest countries in the world. Soja's lusty crying's a good sign. It means the little girl's strong enough to fight. And a small victory. She's gained weight. Her mother smiles for the first time. I'm very happy, she tells us. The young are the most vulnerable. Madagascar is battling after years of failed or poor crops caused by this extended dry period. And this aid is their only hope of survival. They give thanks to the aid agencies. The lack of water has had a knock-on effect, with poor sanitation increasing and ramping up disease. Every day's a fight to eat and to live. And these are the ones who've made it to the main southern city and help. We travelled through the south, the worst-hit region. The country's one of the most biodiverse in the world, with a unique ecosystem and species not found anywhere else on Earth, but it's now struggling. There's very little infrastructure, with mostly unpaved roads and many communities extremely remote, so what aid there is difficult to deliver. The extreme weather includes multiple yearly cyclones and dust storms, making subsistence farming even tougher, and people are becoming more and more desperate. These young herdsmen didn't want to be interviewed. But picking up rocks and waving their farming tools, they demand money to let us through, and then sit down in front of our vehicles and refuse to budge until we do. Our Malagasy colleagues begin negotiations as the herdsmen tell them they're hungry and they need money for food. Our drivers reluctantly hand over cash. When we reach Marofu, the village elder in orange is appalled at the attempted hold-up. Raids on the meagre crops are on the rise here. He's anxious to show us how malnourished the children are, and many are showing signs of acute malnutrition. This is what they've been reduced to eating: cactus flowers, which are devoured very quickly. They offer some relief from hunger pangs, but they will bloat their bellies and cause cramps later. Many have blistered lips and the wizened skin of those 3 times their age. Of course, these are not enough for us, but we've no choice, Hariba tells us. No one has electricity here. They cut trees and burn wood for fuel. So many live in medieval conditions. Rohoniswa has 2 wives and 2 large families with a total of 16 children to feed. I can't ever fill these bowls with enough food for them, he says, and we're always hungry, but I watered the rice down to make it go further. He shows us his second home a few yards away. He's trying to make stuffing for mattresses. But he's not sold anything, so they'll eat cactus flowers again, he says. The village elder insists on escorting us out. His instincts are correct. The herdsmen have been waiting for us to leave on the single track out. The young men are scolded as they protest they need help. Everyone is hungry. Madagascar has contributed virtually nothing to the world's annual carbon emissions, but is probably the worst affected country, and its people are crying out for change. Alex Crawford, Sky News, Madagascar.